Welcome to this lecture by World Climate School. In this you will learn what climate change is, what can and should be done about it, and why you should again get involved in the efforts to do that. And I have a short video here which I think it answers most of your questions in this regard. Enjoy.
Why is the Earth not a cold, dead rock floating in space? The reason is that it is enveloped by this tiny, tiny, thin layer of gases and chemicals that we call our atmosphere. So the sun's energy, rather than just coming down and bouncing right back off, it comes down and is held close to the surface of the Earth for a while and then bounces off. And that simple process is why we have evaporation and precipitation and photosynthesis and life on our planet. So scientists discovered well over 100 years ago that the atmosphere and the systems on the Earth are in this dynamic relationship, and you can change the chemical composition of the atmosphere and hold more of the sun's energy for longer. The energy still has to escape, of course, but in the meantime it will cause changes in these biophysical systems of the Earth. And you often hear people say the Earth has always changed, the climate has always changed, and that's true, it has. This relationship between the atmosphere and the systems, they go through cycles, but these cycles have typically taken hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. The key thing to know first is that for the last 10,000 years on Earth, the climate has been relatively stable, unusually stable. And by stable, I mean temperature has varied, it's gone up and down, but it's stayed in a fairly narrow band of about plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. And all of advanced human civilization has taken place during this 10,000 years. The development of agriculture, the written word, the wheel, the iPhone, everything we know, everything we have built, we have done in this period of relative climate stability. So what we've been doing for the last couple of hundred years is digging up carbon out of the Earth and throwing it up into the atmosphere and changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere, like has happened in the past, except for way, 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 way faster. In geological time, the blink of an eye, we are substantially changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere, and all of climate science has been about what's going to happen, what is the Earth going to do in response to this. And so we've already seen that the process is underway. We have measured, we have witnessed, observed with our eyes and our thermometers about a 0.8 degree Celsius rise in global average temperature since before the industrial age, since before we started digging all this carbon up. And this may not seem like a lot, less than 1 degree Celsius, but the thing to know about it is these greenhouse gases we throw up stay in the atmosphere for a very long time. There are very long time lags involved here. So this 0.8 degree temperature rise is a response to what we were doing 50 to 100 years ago. And what we see in the first half of this century will be a response to what we've done the last 50 years. And what we see in the latter half of this century will be a response to decisions we make today. So the question is, temperature is rising. How high does it have to rise before we need to worry, before we're in danger, before bad things start happening? The typical answer to this question has been 2 degrees Celsius. So obviously, what counts as not dangerous versus dangerous is not a hard scientific question. It's a political question, and this was a political decision to take this 2C number, mainly made by European climate negotiators well over 10 years ago. And it's just sort of stuck since then. All the countries involved in climate negotiations have basically signed on saying, yes, this is what we want to avoid, 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise. The bad news on this 2C number is twofold. First of all the latest science done in the last 10 to 15 years has pointed to the conclusion that those impacts we thought were going to happen around 2 degrees centigrade are in fact going to happen much earlier than that. The climate is more sensitive to this added greenhouse gases than we thought. So if those were the impacts we were worried about, then the real threshold of safety ought to be something like 1.5 degrees centigrade. James Hansen is the climate scientist most famously known for raising these warnings, but it's a growing scientific consensus that 2 degrees is in fact dangerously high. Which is bad because we are almost certainly going to blow past 2 degrees Celsius. There's some reason to believe, a recent study said that even if we stopped our climate emissions tomorrow, we're still going to get more than 3 degrees this century just from momentum from the previous emissions. But stopping at 2 degrees now would take a level of global coordination and ambition that is nowhere in evidence. So a lot of climate scientists don't really want to tell you this because they don't want to depress you, but I'm just a blogger, so I'm happy to depress you. 2 degrees Celsius is probably off the table. So then the question becomes, well, what does it look like if temperature goes higher than that? What would, say, 4 degrees Celsius look like? Oddly, there hadn't really been a lot of concerted scientific attention to that question because climate scientists honestly thought we wouldn't do that to ourselves. But we are doing it to ourselves. So in 2009, several climate change research groups in England drew together a group of scientists, commissioned some papers, and had them really take a hard look for the first time. What would 4 degrees Celsius look like? There were a lot of papers, a lot of equations, a lot of talk and complexity. I have helpfully paraphrased it here for you to make it easier to grasp. 4 degrees Celsius temperature rise would look ugly. Among other things, that would be the hottest the Earth has been in 30 million years. Sea levels would rise at least 3 to 6 feet, and this excludes some really tail end possibilities, but 3 to 6 feet at least. And persistent drought would cover about 40% of the currently occupied land on Earth, which would wreak havoc on agriculture in East Asia, in Africa, South America, Western US. All this combined would produce hundreds of millions of people who had been driven from their homes, either by their cities being swamped by sea level rise or by hunger or by all the attendant ills that come along with those things. And to boot, probably somewhere around half of the known species on Earth would go extinct. According to a recent paper by the International Energy Agency, we are currently on track, if we keep doing what we're now doing, if we go on with business as usual, as it's called, we are now on track for 6 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. Something, 5 to 7. These are obviously estimations. So if 4 degrees is hell on Earth, I'll let your imaginations fill in the blanks on 6 degrees. But one danger that comes up when we contemplate going this high with our temperature is the possibility that climate change will become irreversible. I think when people typically think about climate change, they think, oh, temperature is going to rise X amount, circumstances will change, some places will get warmer, some places will get wetter, we'll adjust, we'll move our farms around, people will migrate from one city to another, we'll get resettled, and we'll go on with life. The really dangerous possibility is that what are called, the Earth has several of what are called positive feedback systems. So for instance, in Siberia, there's this permanent ice, the permafrost, and it contains a bunch of methane in it. As it melts, it releases that methane. The methane causes more warming, which melts more ice, which releases more methane. It's a self-sustaining process. Or sea ice melts. Ice is white, it reflects energy. When it melts, it becomes dark blue and absorbs more energy, which heats the oceans, which melts more ice, which creates more dark surfaces. You see, there's a number of these systems that are self-perpetuating. And the great danger of climate change that towers above all these other more specific dangers is that these positive feedback systems will take on a momentum of their own that becomes unstoppable. And human beings will lose any ability to control it at all, even if we stop all our climate emissions on a dime. Will that happen at 2 degrees? Probably not, though there's a real chance of it, and there's a lot of debate about that. Will it happen at 4 degrees? Well, it looks a lot more likely at 4 degrees. Will it happen at 6 degrees? Almost certainly. So if we continue on our present course, climate change will probably take on a life of its own, spiral out of control, and according to a recent paper, by 2300, we could see temperature rise of up to 12 degrees centigrade. Now, if that happened, something like half the Earth's currently inhabited land would become too hot to survive on. And when I say too hot to survive on, I don't mean it's difficult to grow beans or air conditioning bills are inconveniently high. I mean, if you go outside, you die of hotness. I mean, places that were an average of 80 degrees Fahrenheit will now be an average of 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Literally too hot for human beings to go outside and survive. So, will there still be human civilization under those circumstances? Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll live in underground climate-controlled caves, maybe we'll grow food in test tubes, but that wouldn't look anything like Earth as we now know it. It would look a lot more like Newt Gingrich's moon colony, assuming any human beings, or at least enough to make a civilization, survived in those circumstances. So this is what I mean by climate change being simple. There are many complicated and fascinating discussions to be had about what to do about it, or about what effect our actions might have on the climate and when, or which policies are best based on cost-benefit analysis. There's complexity, plenty of complexity for those of you who like complexity. But we now know to a fair degree of certainty that if we keep doing what we're now doing, we will face unthinkable catastrophe. That's the bumper sticker, that's the take-home message. And that, you know, saying, I don't want to talk about that because I don't know the ins and outs is like saying, I don't want to raise alarms about Hitler's army being 100 miles out because I don't know the thread count of their uniforms, or I don't know the average calorie intake of a German soldier. You don't need to know those things to be scared that the army's on the march and to raise alarms about it. Similarly, if we keep doing what we're now doing, we are screwed. This we know now. To stabilize temperature, and I don't mean stabilize temperature at 2 degrees or 4 degrees or 6 degrees, I mean to ever have a hope of ever again having a stable temperature of any kind, global climate change emissions need to peak, stop growing, peak, and start falling rapidly in the next 5 to 10 years. Every year we do not get started on this, we add, according to the International Energy Agency, an extra $500 billion with a B dollars to the price tag of what it's going to cost us to do this eventually. Every year we wait, that's $500 billion down the drain. Now, you and I look around at current politics, particularly US politics, and massive, coordinated, intelligent, ambitious action does not strike us as particularly plausible. In fact, it might strike us as impossible, but that is where we are, stuck between the impossible and the unthinkable. So your job, anyone who hears this, for the rest of your life, your job is to make the impossible possible.
You might want to pause this lecture here and just think about these questions for a couple of minutes. Write down your answers so you don't forget them, and when you're ready, continue the lecture. After listening to David Roberts, I believe it's obvious to all of you that we do have a global emergency. There are some good news, however. Our faith leaders are waking up, urging their followers to act on climate change. It all started with Pope Francis in his encyclica, and other faith leaders were soon following. And everybody seems to know that we need to abandon fossil fuels. In order to fix this, we need a deep transition. Almost everything needs to change. Our lifestyle, our consumption patterns, our eating habits, our economic system, and much more. Deep down, we need to switch to a completely different set of values and behaviors. And those of us who sense that also sense that this will be very difficult. But the consequences of continuing what we call business as usual are terrifying. Therefore, we need to make these changes, and we need to start now. Our political leaders have been discussing climate change for a long time, but what has come out of it? Most of our political leaders seem to be short-sighted and narrow-minded, only caring about the immediate future for themselves and their voters, not the long perspective for the planet as a whole. And therefore, years of negotiations have been futile. This famous quote from Greta Thunberg nails it. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? Do people know this? I believe many do. Most people have not understood the urgency, however, or they feel powerless, hoping or believing that someone else will solve this. And therefore, education is needed to create general awakening, putting pressure on our elected leaders to make the right decisions. And we all need to be part of this, because Robert Swan is speaking the truth here. And now I want to bring you with me to one of those fantastic beaches in northern Norway. And you know what? I've got a person here who I would like you to meet.
Fun fact, planet Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Mankind, about 140,000 years old. Let me put that in perspective. If you condense the Earth's lifespan into 24 hours, that's one full day, then we have been here on this planet for, drum roll please, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And look what we've done. We have modestly named ourselves Homo sapiens, meaning wise man. But is man really so wise? Smart, yes, and it's good to be smart, but not too smart for your own good. Yes, we have split the atom. Yes, we build clever machines that navigate the universe in search of new homes, but at the same time, those atoms we split created nuclear warfare. In our quest to explore the galaxy, rejects and neglects the home that we have here now, so no, that cannot be wisdom. Wisdom is different. While intelligence speaks, wisdom listens, and we willingly covered our ears to Mother Nature's screams and closed our eyes to all of her help-wanted signs. Wisdom knows that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so if we were wise, we would not be shocked when we see storms that are stronger than ever before, or more drought, hurricanes, and wildfire than ever before, because there's more pollution than ever before, more carbon, more trees cut down than ever before. At a record pace, we have increased the extinction of animals by 1,000 times the normal rate. What a feat. In the next 10 to 100 years, every beloved animal character in every children's book is predicted to go extinct. Lions gone, rhinos gone, tiger, gorilla, elephant, polar bear gone. In 3 seconds. Species that have been here longer than us will be gone because of us. In this 3 seconds. In an existence shorter than a Vine video, we turn the circle of life into our own personal conveyor belt. Somebody, anybody help. We were given so much, the only planet in this solar system with life. I mean, we are 1 in a million. No, actually, scientifically, we are 1 in a billion, trillion. That's a 1 followed by 33 zeros. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but how are we not a miracle? We are perfectly positioned to the sun so we don't burn, but not too distant so we don't turn to ice. Goldilocks said it best. We are just right. This paradise where we are given medicine from trees, not coincidentally, but because like the song says, we are family. Literally, everything, every species is connected genetically from the sunflower to the sunfish. And this is what we must recognize before it's too late, because the real crisis is not global warming, environmental destruction, or animal agriculture. It is us. These problems are symptoms of us, byproducts of us. Our inner reflection, loss of connection has created this misdirection. We have forgotten that everything contributes to the perfection of Mother Nature. Corporations keep us unaware and disconnected, but they have underestimated our strength. Contrary to popular belief, millions are waking up out of their sleep, seeing our home being taken right up under our feet. We cannot allow our history to be written by the wicked, greedy, and loony. It is our duty to protect Mother Nature from those who refuse to see her beauty. Call me crazy, but I believe we should have the right to eat food that's safe, with ingredients we can pronounce. Drink water that is clean, marvel at trees, breathe air free of toxins. These are natural rights, not things that can be bargained for in Congress. See, they want you to feel powerless, but it has been said that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly's wing can cause a typhoon halfway around the world. But when enough people come together, we too will make waves and wash the world into a new era filled with love and connection, freedom for all without oppression. But it is up to you, yes, you watching this behind this screen, to make the effort, because time is of the essence, and only together can we make it to the 4th second.
Some people believe that climate change is something far away in time and space. Let's now take a look at how it impacts us right here, right now. Meet climate scientist James Hansen, one of the world's leading climate scientists. A very short version of his biography is on the image here. After his retirement, his has often been seen like this. He quit his job and became a full-time climate activist because he didn't want his grandchildren to ask him, "Grandpa, you knew about all this? Why didn't you do something?" I was lucky enough to meet him at COP21 in Paris and followed him through a couple of days. And what he said had a very profound impact on my thinking and my work. His main focus was on ice melting in Antarctica, in Greenland, at the North Pole, and glaciers all over the world. He issued a dire warning. If we do not get out of fossil fuels rapidly, we will have a multi-meter sea level rise, much higher than earlier models have predicted. And we need to include nuclear power in order to succeed in this rapid transition. So according to James Hansen, this scenario cannot be ruled out, with dire consequences for all coastal cities. We already see the consequences of sea level rise in low-lying island communities. A couple of years ago, a very severe drought hit California. It varies in strength from year to year, but never seems to disappear completely, and the aquifers are drying up. The Syrian conflict started as a consequence of severe drought. Lack of water causing 1.5 million people to migrate from the countryside into the cities, exacerbating poverty and social unrest. Therefore, Syrian refugees are in reality climate refugees. But water scarcity is constituting a looming threat in large parts of the world. In 2019, for example, Cape Town almost ran out of water. This image speaks for itself. People lining up for water. Water being more and more restricted over time, with the options rapidly narrowing down. In some parts of the planet, food scarcity is already a reality. And with limited access to clean water, needed both for drinking and for irrigation, we may face an impossible choice: death by starvation or death by dehydration. We have witnessed massive increases in wildfires in California, in Australia, and in Siberia. Extreme weather events coming more frequently and with more power all over the world. Our oceans being acidified and at the same time filled up with plastic trash. We have been witnessing also a serious biodiversity crisis. Species are going extinct at a very scary rate, and our lifestyle and climate change seem to be the main causes for this. So I wonder, who will be the next to go? Will it be us? And what can we do to avoid it? Okay, now I will challenge you with an assignment. You see here Fenway Park Stadium in Boston. And this is your assignment, step by step. Imagine a pipette releasing a magical drop down into the stadium at 12 o'clock. The droplet has the property that it's doubling in size every minute. After about 6 minutes, it fills a thimble. First question: when is the stadium full of water? Second question: when is the stadium 7% full? Third question: imagine also that you are sitting linked to a chair on the top row. When do you realize that there is a danger ahead? Write down your answers to these 3 questions. If you need time to think, pause the video. If you have your answers now, then you can go on. Otherwise, you still need time. Pause the video. Okay. Now I trust you have written down your answers and are ready to face the facts. The answer to the first question is 12.49 hours. The answer to the second question is 12.45 hours. And to the third question, the answer is much too late. And when it comes to climate, we are at 12.48 hours. If you were far from the correct answers, don't worry. Most people are. So are we smart or stupid? Obviously, we're not smart enough to see dangers ahead soon enough. But does that mean that we are stupid? I prefer to see it differently. It's not our brains that are dysfunctional. We just don't know enough. So we need to get educated. Exponential growth looks very innocent in the beginning, but after a while it becomes dangerous. A typical example is population growth. It's worth noticing that since 1950, global population has grown from around 3 billion to 7.8 billion now. Therefore, it's no wonder that feeding the world's population is becoming increasingly difficult. Katharine Hayhoe, one of the world's leading climate scientists, has a very simple message to us. The most important thing you can do to fight climate change is talk about it. In order to be able to talk about it in a qualified way, we need knowledge. And as you learn more, start sharing your knowledge. Start sharing it with others. That means learning and teaching at the same time. As a voter, demand from the candidate or party you vote for that they make the battle against climate change their top priority. If not, change the way you vote. Greta speaks out with capital letters, calling eternal economic growth a fairy tale, and you can do that too. Margaret Klein Salomon is one of my primary sources of inspiration in the climate battle. Like me, she's a psychologist. I discovered her blog in 2014, connected with her, and she has been my inspiration ever since. Let me read a bit of her biography for you. Margaret Klein Salomon, PhD, calls herself the climate psychologist. Trained in clinical psychology, she worked as a therapist until 2014, when she left her practice to found the Climate Mobilization, a volunteer organization dedicated to initiating a transformation of the economy, the politics, and the society in order to respond to the climate emergency. As part of her work, she encourages people to talk openly and honestly with their loved ones about their terror and existential dread about how drastically the world is likely to change in the coming years, and then to help them take action. The title of her latest book is Facing the Climate Emergency: How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth, a self-help guide to living with the reality of climate change. It is highly recommended. Normally, I do not read the content of a slide, but I consider this so important that I will make an exception here. Margaret is challenging us all to become heroes, and she adds, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be the opposite of easy. But acknowledging the truth of our climate and ecological emergency, grieving the past and the future that has been lost, and taking the heroic path of the climate warrior will make you confident and strong. It will give you a mission and purpose beyond anything you have experienced before. It will allow you to at long last heal your pain and feel genuinely good about yourself. It will connect you to your fellow humans, and it will connect you to all life. It will give you real, meaningful hope because it's based on your real and incredible potential to affect change. Most importantly, it will give humanity a better chance of canceling the apocalypse and protecting itself and the living world. We definitely need a rapid global mobilization for climate change. Franklin D. Roosevelt's mobilization of the American people during the Second World War is a fine example to be followed. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, he held a flaming speech to the American people. First of all, this had the consequences of the United States entering the Second World War. But in addition, the industry, especially the car industry, rapidly changed their production lines from peacetime to wartime production, meaning production of fighter planes, tanks, cannons, etc. Pearl Harbor was their wake-up call. We are in a similar situation. We need a global mobilization of the same magnitude. We have already had our wake-up call, and we need to follow it. So, we need to go off fossil fuels fast. As you see, greenhouse gas emissions come from a variety of economic sectors. Mainly electricity and heat production, agriculture, forestry and other land use, industry and transportation. And for some it may be a surprise that agriculture and the land use has a larger share than transportation. And that is a challenge for our eating habits as we shall soon see. Do you remember James Hansen talking about a rapid transition to clean energy in order to avoid runaway melting of ice sheets in Antarctica and Greenland? He also said that this goal cannot be reached via renewables alone. We have to include nuclear energy produced with the latest technologies based on thorium and molten salt. If we don't do that, we will have to reduce our energy use dramatically. Animal agriculture, especially production of beef, is guilty on 2 points. The environmental impact of meat versus vegetables is staggering. The exact figures may vary a little depending on where you find them, but I believe this shows some clear trends. A serving size of meat compared to a serving size of vegetables is linked to 20 times more greenhouse gas emissions. It also takes 100 times the amount of land as consuming vegetables. And then I have not even mentioned the huge differences when it comes to water use in the production process. Therefore, we should all eat much less meat and dairy products starting now. It may not be easy, but we have to. Many of our transport options are depending on using fossil fuels. Look for alternative transportation, walking, cycling, using trains or trams or other public transport. Where this isn't possible, carpool or shared journeys. Electric or hybrid vehicles are better choices for the environment than petrol-powered vehicles, especially if the electricity powering them is produced by a non-CO2 emitting process. And smaller cars are better choices than bigger ones, particularly when you drive alone. And less car driving does have some health benefits. And if you feel bad because you're not able to reduce enough, you can offset your carbon footprint by paying for tree planting to organizations that handle this kind of transaction. And reducing our home energy use is something we all can get better at. The demand for eternal growth embedded in our capitalistic system has transformed many of us to mainly being consumers with a seemingly endless need for the latest version of anything. The result is a very destructive use and discard behavior. And since most things are no longer produced to last, the system supports this kind of behavior. But we are over-exploiting the planet, so this needs to stop. We need a totally new and radically different value system, not focused on having, owning, but on alternatives like sharing and caring. And the old values of reducing, reusing, and recycling and repairing will come to life again. So, summarizing what you can do as an individual, we will just have these words in focus. Learning and teaching, reduce, reuse, recycle, repair, home energy efficiency, climate-friendly transport, less meat and more veggies, plant trees to compensate. And as a member of a community, you should share knowledge, you should start sharing things, you should start carpooling, grow food locally, and support local farms and markets. Why should you do this? Well, first of all, in order to prepare a future with less cheap energy, but also to build a sense of community and belonging, developing more local self-sufficiency and resilience, shortly getting better and stronger bonds to the people around you. When it comes to your role as a citizen of a democratic country and a member of the global community, you should do whatever possible to influence the policy makers and make them do what is right. You should demand that the party and the politicians you vote for put fighting climate change on top of the agenda. And you should join climate active groups and organizations and contribute with your skills. What is in it for you? The list of benefits is long. Being connected in these ways brings you joy, fun, inspiration, a feeling of belonging, and a deep feeling of meaningfulness. And good reason to get up in the morning and follow your passion, together with like-minded people from all over the world. Believe me, I know. That's how it is for me, and that's how I think it is for all of my fellow climate warriors. Thank you so much for following us so far. Now I think you know all the basics about what climate change is and what you should do, what you can do, and now only one thing remains. If you want to join us, or if you want in some way to support our work, please click one of the contact links in the text below the video, and come back to us. We, as I've said often in this, we want to create a network. We want to create local chapters everywhere on the planet. So if you are one of those, please contact us through one of those links below. Talk to you again soon. Bye, and thank you for now.